The Engineer class is a lot like the Demo Man in Team Fortress 2. His high explosive weapons deal a lot of damage to enemies, but they rely on him being up close and personal. Of course, Hogs of War doesn't have a source engine, so more complex weaponry like pipe bombs and sticky bombs ain't gonna be a thing. Enough about the physics and stuff though. What do we currently know about the Engineer class and his abilities? Well, just as with every class in this game, there are indeed 3 tiers. You have the Sapper with 80 health, who has a Trotter, shotgun, 3 mine and TNT combination. The Engineer, who has 100 health, he has the same weaponry but with the additional TNT, shrapnel grenades and suicide, which as we all know is pretty lame. The Saboteur is the final one with 120 health, who has the same but with the super shotgun and additional TNT. So the first thing to notice is that this class has the most health within its first 2 upgradable tiers, most notably boasting 5 and 10 HP more than the heavy weapons class. It's an interesting concept, seeing as a class that is called heavy weapons doesn't actually have the most health. Instead, here you have a class that solely relies on getting up in the faces of the enemy. To begin with, it can be kind of difficult to rely on the Sapper and Engineer in the early stages of the single player campaign to actually do anything helpful, seeing as you don't come up against any vehicles until mission 7. The player needs to get close enough to blow up enemies while still keeping in mind the distance you are from the target, because self-damage is always going to be something that is quite common with this class. But from the 18 years that I've spent playing this game, I've found that the Engineer class is just my least favourite, and to be honest, I don't actually know why I dislike it the most. I'm not saying it's not effective, I just find it kind of boring. But hear me out on this one though. You've got the directional power and accuracy of the heavy weapons class, the snippety sniping ability of the espionage class, and the healing of the medics. But the Engineer class was always walk forward, plant TNT, run away. Everything for me was already set in motion. His damage numbers are always the same, as TNT will always do 50 damage as long as you put it underneath an enemy. The shotgun will always do 30 damage if, the shotgun pellets, all of them connect. The mines will always do 20 damage individually. Basically, it all feels the same, and I know that Hogs of War has a set amount of damage numbers in terms of the maximum amount of damage it can do, but I don't know. The need to be so close to the enemy just does not appeal to me, and as I'm sure you can tell, long range is definitely not this class's strong point. Okay, sure, the Engie and the Saboteur have the shrapnel grenades, but you'll find them way more effective against artillery and pillboxes than against pigs. That is, unless you manage to hit the detonation button at the right time, which sometimes causes all the pieces of shrapnel to hit that targeted pig, and it can just do crazy amounts of damage. I don't know if it was ever intended by the devs for that to happen, but either way, it's not as reliable as when you compare it to planting mines or planting TNT, who have a set amount of damage. Of course, when you arrive at the stage of Saboteur, everybody just starts jizzing over the super shotgun. It does exactly the same amount of damage as the normal shotgun, only this time it's able to launch pigs across the map, sometimes causing them to fall off the map and die instantly. Other than the extra health and the additional ammo, the Saboteur is pretty much the same as its previous state, but my main issue with the super shotgun is that you need to position yourself underneath a target, aiming upwards to get the most out of the knockback ability. This means that it is actually very situational, but indeed very fun to use at the same time. In all, the Engineer of today is very effective at providing high amounts of damage to multiple targets, but it requires the player to think much more about their positioning when using this class. 90% of the time in Hogs of War, if you put your pigs close to the enemy, they will decide the easier option and target that pig that is closest to them. Having said that, the extra health of the Engineer class means that you're able to take a few more punches before requiring medical attention. So being a high impact character today, what would this class's development have been like, and how did it change and become what we know it to be? Well, do you all remember my heavy weapons class video? The one where I talked about it in detail as I do in this bootcamp video? Well, it turns out that the early version that I thought to be the heavy weapons class was actually the Engineer. I don't know why I thought it was this way, but in my defense, the weaponry for the heavy weapons class can kind of raise some suspicion, seeing as it has, mines, I guess. Either way, the Engineer has 2 different bazookas, a knife, a build ability, and a suicide. Meanwhile, the heavy weapons class most notably has poison gas, a rifle, mines, and bazooka. It was just kind of a mishmash of everything at this point, hence my confusion, so I do apologise for that one. Progressing into early alpha then, and we see a somewhat functional build ability with the first upgradable tier remaining with the same name of Sapper. This character remains pretty much the same as today's version, but with the only exception of having no TNT and instead that being replaced by a build a wall ability. Now on the face of it, it may not seem like much, but in actual fact this brings a whole new element into the game that we have not seen before. Having the ability to build does take up a turn, but to build something that can shield you from most types of damage, it is a pretty big thing. You'll also notice that the Sapper starts with a base health of 120, which as we know is the current highest health a pig can have at the top of its career path in the current game. This is what I was talking about last time though, just about how this version of the game in alpha was just way too slow with massive health pools, low damage numbers, and matches would just go on for way too long. On to the second tier then, and we have the Staff Sergeant, also known as the Engineer in the game. I don't know why they chose to give it two different names when in the game and when in the menu, but hey, there you go. So in terms of progression, we see the health increase by 10 to 130, the addition of a TNT, and the function of being able to build a shelter. So far, I really do prefer this version of the class to what it is currently. Being able to build stuff for your team is huge, and you can see that instead of being given a bunch of other weapons through the upgrade system as it is with other classes, this class is instead given other ways to benefit the team as a whole. Shelters are indeed an upgrade to a simple wall, giving the player inside a shield of 100 HP, and it's just a perfect place to hide when you're up against heftier opposition. You will of course notice that even though the shield model wasn't implemented yet, the collision box was, as was the ability to jump in and out regardless of how messy it may look. The third and final stage before the upgrade to Commando is the Warrant Officer, also known as the Architect in game to me and you. Yet again, the health is increased by 10 to 140, the regular mines are replaced by anti-tank mines, which as we know do more damage, an additional TNT is added along with suicide, and the ability to build a freaking pillbox. I mean, damn! That's a game changer in terms of Hogs of War. Quite literally, when you build it, the landscape changes around it, so it can actually, be fitted in to the game world around it. Despite this, at this point in its development, the pillbox doesn't actually have any functioning weapons, so all you can do is use it to move around and basically one big shield. Speaking of which, just as it is in the current game, enemy pigs will always target vehicles over other pigs, but just imagine being dominated by the enemy team, running low on ammo, and suddenly BAM! Here's a pillbox, take that. Once again, it's just an awesome twist on how we see this class as a whole, and really how it could have been used to greater effect. As mentioned previously though, the main issue with this version of the game was that it was too damn slow, so the fact that the engineer would have to walk to their designed building spot whilst traversing mostly upward terrain against the clock, you can kind of see why it wouldn't have worked in today's game. There just isn't enough room on most of the single player maps to actually go ahead and build something. As we progress further into the game's development though, the overall development of the character has kind of stopped at this point. The beta version was only really used to iron out any additional bugs and UI issues, so this is where we see the character that we know today. Nevertheless, even after all of that, I still know that the Engineer class will remain my least chosen character to play. After the realization that the build ability wasn't going to be used, it just feels as though the devs went with the usual development of a simple increase in health, ammo, and firepower. This is in no way bad, but it just feels like a chance was missed and we could have seen this character in a different light, It could have been less about damage and more about supplying your team with necessary equipment in order to protect as well as deal more damage. But what do you think about this class and its development? Do you agree with my thoughts on the buildability and stuff? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know what you think. Let's get a discussion going as we always do. In the meantime, that's pretty much going to wrap everything up. I hope you enjoyed and indeed learned something along the way. I feel these Bootcamp series videos are going pretty well, and I do intend to continue it into the final two classes and beyond. So in the meantime, I hope you can stay tuned, and I will catch you guys later for the next one.